Threat, just one of the latest developments in a war nearing the 6-month mark. Here to break down where we are right now is Dr. Paul Chabot. He's the former commander of naval intelligence and former commander in the U.S. Navy Reserve. He's worked for a Democratic and a Republican president and has a great deal of experience. Dr. Chabot, it's good to see you. Where would you kind of put us right now? Where are we at? We heard, of course, so much of the military threats from the United States, attacks themselves, and now it seems like they're using dollars.
It is. It's going to turn into economic warfare on both sides of the fence. So remember, the 60-day MOU ended this past Monday, but that MOU did not state that hostilities could essentially begin at the 61st day or forward. So basically, talks right now are frozen, and that does not mean that hostilities are imminent. I do think that Iran is clearly watching the U.S. elections coming up in November. They're reading the newspapers and polling as well. But Iran is very much more emboldened. They're saying that the strait is closed, and the U.S. responds saying, no, it is still open. So you are seeing both now transitioning into economic warfare, and that was ramped up today when Trump specifically said toughest sanctions in history.
You know, we're talking about whether the strait is open or it's not. A lot of semantics, a lot of differences in opinion, but the bottom line right now is, if the strait is open, it is certainly not at its full capacity, and that's causing problems for the world right now when it comes to oil supply.
It is. Look, the Strait of Hormuz, you got about 1/5 of the world's oil that moves out of there. And to get a good gauge of how many ships are moving through or how the world feels about this overall, just look at the price of oil. We're hovering around $90 per barrel. Obviously, not good. Now, think about this also. China, which was basically warned by the United States not to support Iran, receives about 80% of their oil from Iran. So the United States has said, look, we may look at sanctions on China. The China president is coming to the United States here shortly to meet with Trump. So these are going to be talks that are going to happen down the road. However, the American pocketbook issues are what are so clear today, and it seems as if there is absolutely no end in sight.
You know, it's interesting, Dr. Chabot. We talked about 4 or 5 weeks ago talking about a crushing military strategy to make sure that Iran didn't get its hands on nuclear weapons or didn't develop them again. And now we're talking about sanctions to put pressure on them. Does that take place of the military strikes they were planning to make sure that they don't develop a nuclear weapon? And how do you stop nuclear weapons? You do that with sanctions?
Well, I feel that we are not in a very good place in the United States or the free world with Iran right now. I do feel they have the upper hand. And remember, they're not just threatening the United States. They've continued to missile United Arab Emirates, which today announced that they are cutting off all trade with Iran. And Iran also said that if this war continues, they would strike the European Union. NATO, of course, said we'll be ready for that. But think about this. Iran went from largely a defensive posture to now very significant offensive language. That's the concern going forward. However, I do feel that both sides agree this is stalled out. Jared Kushner was there recently, and Trump has basically said, look, talks are over. We're now going to move on to stronger economic sanctions. What that looks like is yet still to be determined. The nuclear issue, though, has unfortunately been forgotten in the conversation, and I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Yeah, and that is the main reason that President Trump says we're there, is to make sure they don't develop something that's that dangerous to the rest of the world. So definitely deserves our speaking on that. I do want to ask you about Tehran. They came out and basically said, look, all this economic threats that are coming our way, there's a price to be paid for that. They're threatening violence and military action back. What does that end up looking like?
When we look historically through world wars and world wars, sanctions, economic sanctions have largely led to wars to begin with. The tighter that the noose gets put around Iran economically, the more they could potentially fear their people rising up. Right now, we have not seen that in great numbers. The United States had hoped that that would happen. It has not. I think part of the U.S. strategy in the sanctions is to squeeze the regime, which is going to put pressure on their people to potentially rise up, which is why Iran does not want to lose power. They will absolutely strike against their neighbors, and now as they have threatened potentially the European Union as well. And they have the capability to do it. They've already shown that they could strike Diego Garcia, other places their missiles can reach all throughout Europe.
Oh, we'll keep watching it every step of the way, and we'll do it with some of your perspective as well. Dr. Paul Chabot, thanks for your time here tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, straight ahead.